Well guys, this build right here, which actually came out pretty nicely and it is an easy to copy build for under 200 bucks, which will actually play at 1080p with great performance, was one of the hardest builds I've done to date, because literally anything that could go wrong went wrong, and not in the clickbaity way which usually tech tubers use, but like literally. So let's start with order. First off, this was meant to be an X79 build with a different motherboard, which was actually based on the FC-LGA 1356 with a 6-core Xeon. That's what we had in mind, and it's actually the motherboard on which I got scammed. I have a dedicated video on it, and I basically bought it on AliExpress, and it arrived with a broken pin, and even after fixing the pin, it was still broken. First off, I went ahead and built the PC with that, with a different cooler for literally nothing. Then I dismounted the whole thing and started again. But even in the original PC, we had so many issues. So the case arrived fully broken. The bottom part was broken, the mesh was bent, and the front panel was fully detached. Listen to this. Right now still it's not the best, but I put some zip ties and some glue, and now it's holding together. This is kind of my fault, because this is a Techwear Nexus Air M2. I could have just sent it back if I saw it was broken, but I had it in my studio for like a month. And so by the time I opened it up and it was broken, it was too late to ask for a refund. The power supply, which I bought used for 10 bucks, and it's a Mars Gaming PSU. Now I know it's not the best. Mars Gaming now makes great power supplies, good power supplies, okay? But the first ones they made were terrible, and this is one of the first ones. I bought it for 10 bucks, but it arrived with the missing cables, so I had to adapt a different PCIe cable, which is something you genuinely should never do, because you literally can break your graphics card or your power supply or your motherboard, or even have the whole thing catch on fire if you do it wrong. But I used a multimeter to check the voltages, made sure that everything was working fine, checked the resistance, spent a good 10 minutes on it, and so everything worked in that sense. Now those are basically all the problems we encountered. We also had a broken SSD, but whatever, things that happen. So now we can actually get on how you can build a PC like this, hopefully being a little bit less unlucky than me, because this is just pure bad luck. First off, buy a cheap M80X case, and I really like what Techwear does. I prefer the RGB version, by the way. I built a 46 bucks PC with a 3090 in one of their cases, which goes to show that they are actually good cases for airflow. They're fully meshed and they have good room for expandability. So I recommend you buy one of these, but if you want to keep the price low, just buy a fully black one like this. It should have an MSRP of around 35 to 40 bucks, even cheaper I've seen it go for. So really good. Techwear is a UK brand, so if you're in the UK, it's probably gonna cost even less. Then you wanna buy a cheap power supply. Power supplies are an important part of your computer, but if you're building a very low power PC, and if you don't plan on overclocking at all, and if you don't care about expandability, you can cheap out on them. The recommendation I give you is do not go ahead and buy a cheap power supply. Try to find a good power supply which is old. So this one, for example, it is like 5 years old, so I paid 10 bucks for it. It's not the best PSU, but it's still better than one of those gray PSUs from a like brand you've never heard, right? So you can buy like a Cooler Master 700 watts power supply for like 15 bucks on eBay, or like OfferUp, like Craigslist, sites like that, and it's what I recommend. The focus of the build, the center part, is what I have still to mention. So it's an X99 platform, and I bought a Machinist X99 DDR4 motherboard for 30 bucks. Those motherboards are basically, they adapt a workstation chipset called C601, and they adapt them to make different sockets. What that means is we have all the modern features like USB free, we have PCI Express Gen 3, USB free on the back, as well as on the front. Fans, header, you don't have RGB headers, but you have pretty much all the rest. And the BIOS, I will show you the footage, is surprisingly good. Like, you even have overclocking features, you can enable the resizable bar, you can do a lot. So Machinist boards are recommended from me. If you have to buy like a Chinese X99, Machinist is a good brand. Now, X99 is a great platform in 2024. I made a full video about why it's good, but I was talking about like branded motherboards like Asus, MSI, etc. But this is like little review of the unbranded ones as well. Well, Machinist is a decent brand, but you know what I mean. They are good if you're going for low-end stuff. Another thing, this motherboard will allow you to use the cheapest ECC DDR4 RAM you can find. You can literally buy it for like 10 bucks for 16 gigabytes on eBay. Generally, you can buy this straight from AliExpress in a combo with a Xeon, and I recommend you get an i5 2670 V3. But what I have here is an i7, because I managed to buy it for 10 bucks. So it's a 6-core 12-threaded i7, and now the i7s, first off, you can sell them better because they are i7s. But second thing, they clock higher. So in gaming, they are more powerful than Xeons. Of course, this being a 6-core 12-threaded and the Xeon being an 8-core 16-threaded, for productivity, the Xeon would be better. But for gaming, this thing is insanely good value for money, and it has quad channels. So if you put 4 sticks of 16 gigabytes, you can have for 40 bucks a 64 gigabyte quad channel gaming machine, which will double the speed of your RAM. So if it is even just 2133 megahertz RAM, it's gonna run at an effective 4266 megahertz, which is DDR5 level speed. So it's pretty good. It also has NVMe support, so you can also use one of those. Now I went with a SATA one just to keep the cost down. I bought a 0.5 terabyte SATA drive for 15 bucks, again used, and I recommend you do that. SATA drivers are so cheap, and if you don't do productivity work, you don't really need an NVMe. Yes, it makes the PC a bit faster, but you don't need it. So if you can buy a SATA one for cheap, go for a SATA one. At that point, GPU. Now, what I got here was an absolute steal. 50 bucks for a GTX 1660 Super MSI Gaming X. Okay, so this is not easy to replicate, but I recommend you look for a GTX 1660 non-super from a cheaper brand like Zotac. Zotac cards are not too bad. Made a video about it in case you're considering buying one of those used. If you do that, you can definitely buy one for 50 to 60 bucks. Throw it in and your PC is ready, because the motherboard is like 30 bucks, RAM is 10 bucks for 16 gigabytes, CPU 10 to 15 depending on what you buy, SSD 10 to 15, PSU 10 to 15, 30 bucks on the case, and the cooler, well, I have the stock cooler, but not the stock cooler you guys probably know. This is an older stock cooler, because on X99 CPUs just came with this massive thing, which is actually really good. Like, I will put the temperature results on the screen, and it was running surprisingly cool. I don't want to say quiet because you can kind of hear it, but at least it was running cool. It's like big piece of aluminum, so it helps in a well-ventilated case. Now, I'll admit I had this cooler already, so I didn't pay for it, but even if you pay like for it, you can buy it for like 5 bucks, or even buy like a single tower, cheap tower on AliExpress for 10 bucks. Like, especially if you get a Xeon, they do not draw power at all. You can cool them even with an Intel like modern stock cooler. The only problem is it's not gonna fit on this motherboard, but literally very easy to cool. Now, the motherboard also allowed for some overclocking, but I wasn't able to get the i7 stable, and I think it wouldn't be smart to overclock on that board because the VRMs are tiny. So do not overclock your CPU on this motherboard, but what you can do is overclock your GPU, which is what I've done. Now, if you don't know how to overclock or undervolt your hardware, I have a dedicated playlist for all of that. It's what we do on the channel pretty much, but we got 15% more performance, so keep that in mind for the benchmarks which you're gonna see. Speaking of which, first off, I ran a synthetic score in Firestrike, and it was surprisingly good. I remember just 3 years back, even if you check on my channel, I was paying probably 600 bucks for a PC with this kind of score, and today we can do it for 200, which is crazy good. But the gaming results are even more impressive. So I tested Apex Legends 1080p low settings with high view distance, and we can do 144 Hz on average, easy. We were doing like 180 in some parts, and the gameplay was really smooth. I then tested Call of Duty Warzone to try something more heavy. Now the new Call of Duty is about to come out, but still, Warzone is a very heavy title, and we were doing like 70 FPS on average, maybe 80 on like if you spend most of your gameplay inside, but I'm gonna call 70 for it. Even that, like, it was just running with no noticeable dips, and it was running smoothly. So you can build a gaming PC which will allow you to play pretty much anything on the market, maybe not Cyberpunk, but all the rest, for 200 bucks, and that's mostly thanks to the GTX 1660 being so cheap, first off, and then X99 motherboards plus CPUs being literally thrown at you from China. So it's a pretty good buy in my opinion, but I want to hear your opinion down below so you can tell me if I'm wrong or if I should do something better to get even more value and bring the price down. Should I try out X79? Let me know down below, and also if you liked the video, drop a like and a sub to support the channel, and I hope to see you guys again in another one of these projects. Bye bye.